All right, so this is the final part of the tutorial where we're going to take our fully modeled avocado pieces and export them, bring them into some slicing software, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to set up your models for success in the slicing software. So if you don't already have Ultimaker Cura, you can come here to the download page and download for free. Now let's go back into Blender, and I'm going to start by exporting the peel of the avocado. So I'm going to say File, Export, STL, and by default it's going to be named the same as the Blender, the .blend file, which I saved as avocado tutorial.stl. I'm going to change this to what is it, peel.stl. That works fine. And I'm going to say selection only. If I don't check this box off, it's going to export the whole scene, and we don't want that. We just want this one model. So everything else looks good. The scale, if we didn't apply the scale, we might have to worry about that, but we did, so no worries there. And then we can export STL. All right, and then let's move on to the flesh. File, export STL, same as before. And oh, I forgot to mention, in the last part, I forgot to rename the pit. So this was called cube, I renamed it to pit. But back to the flesh, we're gonna file, export STL. And instead of peel.stl, this is flesh.stl. All right, selection only, that looks good. Export STL, and then finally the pit. Export STL and pit, and I'm missing a dot there, so I'm gonna add that again. So pit.stl, selection only, scale, all looks good. So we've exported them into our avocado tutorial folder, which is in my 3DP folder. I have a folder for all of my models that I export. So we're pretty much done with Blender. I'm just gonna Control S to save and then move over to Ultimaker Cura. This is what it looks like the first time you fire it up. I'm going to just say next, agree, skip, and add a non-networked printer. And I'm using an Ender 3 V2, which is made by Creality. So I'm going to go under here to Creality 3D, and the Ender 3 V2 is not listed, but the Ender 3 is. So I'm going to select that, and then it's going to ask about dimensions and stuff. The dimensions of the Ender 3 V2 are 220 by 220 by 250. You're going to want to know the bed dimensions of your own 3D printer. Everything else looks good to me. I'm going to say next, 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 skip. It's telling me all these new features, looks good. So now we're finally in the slicing software. We can start. The controls are a little bit different. I'm sure you can figure it out pretty easily. We're starting by hitting this folder icon to import an object, and I'm going to go to my 3DP folder, avocado tutorial, and let's start with the peel because there's something cool about the peel that I want to show you. So by default it's facing away from us. We can rotate it by grabbing this blue handle here, and then there we go. It should snap, I think, 15 degrees every time we move it, but it's standing tall. We want it to kind of print like a dome shape, because if it's standing tall like this, there's like very little contact with the bed. So we're gonna go select it and then go to rotate and then select face to align to the build plate. We're gonna grab that one, that option, and then we're going to zoom way in because this face is kind of small, and make sure we're selecting this flat part of the peel. So we click that, and then it automatically just flattens it down. So now we are printing like a dome. And then there's some things we can go through, like some settings. These are very basic settings. I want to get more advanced. So I'm going to go to custom, and first I'll be printing in PLA. So I'm going to change the printing temperature under material to I think 220, 215, somewhere around that range is pretty good. And then for my heated bed, it's going to be 60 degrees Celsius. All right, speed settings, all of that, I'm going to leave that the same. And then there is a setting that I want to talk about. So if you go up here to Ultimaker Cura, Preferences, then you'll see all these settings. And I want to get into settings here where we can search instead of general. And then I'm going to search for something cool called fuzzy skin. And this is under experimental features. And I'm going to check all of these off and close. Now, another quick note about settings is if I go back into preferences, under general, if you find that the preview feature is giving you some problems, like if it's too laggy or if it's crashing, you can go down here to force layer view compatibility mode and then restart Cura, and it should be fine. So just a quick note there. So now that we've added the fuzzy skin, we can go scroll down here to experimental, click the drop down, and we're going to check off fuzzy skin. And what this does is move the nozzle back and forth a little bit as it's drawing the perimeter, which is going to give our avocado kind of a bumpy texture, which is what I want. And I want it to be on the outside only, so I'm going to check fuzzy skin outside only. Quality is going to be 0.2. That's fine. I'm happy with that. And we're ready to go. So I'm going to slice, give it a second, and we can preview. So it's going to take a couple hours. That's all good with me. And I'm going to preview, and yep, that looks like a pretty standard slice. We've got, we're moving up and down. Yep, that looks good to me. So I'm going to save to disk, and I'm going to save it in the same folder that I saved the STLs. So under avocado tutorial, CE3 underscore peel, the default name looks fine to me. So I'm going to save. All right, first model down and exported into G code, ready for our printer. Now let's move on to the second model. So instead of preview, I'm going to go to prepare, delete this object, go back up here to import. This one's going to be the flesh. Here it is. Same deal, we can rotate it. Now we could rotate it to the orientation that we want from Blender before we export, but I wanted to show you what it looks like to change the orientation in Cura. So we're gonna lay flat. I'm selecting select face to build plate and then select this big flat face, and then it just falls down. Cool, so now it's printing like a dome like we want it to. But let's go back into the settings here, and this one I don't want it to be fuzzy skin, so I'm going to uncheck fuzzy skin. There we go. I just want it to be smooth so that it fits nicely into the peel. Everything else looks good, PLA, all that stuff, slice. And the reason that I am doing these models individually is because, well, one, we can have different settings on each model, and two, I'm going to be using different filaments. You could print your whole avocado in one color and then maybe paint it later, but I have a black filament, a green filament, and a brown filament, so I'm going to be using those separately. So this is going to take 2 hours. Cool. Save to disk. Everything looks good. Flesh.g code, I like it. And then, oops, I'm still in rotate mode. I didn't preview, but I'm sure it looks fine. I'm going to delete that. And then import the last one, which is the pit. Now, the pit, we have a bit of a problem with this pit. If you look at the bottom here, you notice that it's bright red. That means there's a lot of overhang. So it looks at the angles and it's like, well, this is like less than 45 degrees. That's going to be hard to print. So it marks it as red, letting you know that it might be hard to print. And the way that we can work around this and help it print is by going to the settings, and under support, we say generate support, and the default will be fine. But on top of that, you'll notice that we have a bottomless pit, right? So it's round on the bottom. We didn't flatten it out in Blender. We could move this down if we want to, but I don't want to do that. That's going to change the shape of our pit. Oh, what happened? Let me re-import this because it looks like I deleted it. All right, there it is. We've generated support. Looks good. but there's very little contact on the bottom. If we, let's say we slice this right now, we preview it, and we notice at the very bottom, the very first layer is just this tiny, tiny little circle. And then there's some support there, but this circle is something I'm worried about, because when you have only that much touching the bed, it might detach, it might roll around, and your print might fail. So in order to fix this, I'm going to go back into prepare and then go to, where is it? Adhesion, build plate adhesion. By default, it's a skirt. We want to change this to a brim. So all this does is take the first layer and extend it out by however much you want. And it's going to help the first layer contact the bed. So now we have a brim, we have support, and I think our pit is going to print well now. So if we slice this again, it's going to take 33 minutes, looks good. And we now have that brim on the outside. See, there's that red ring, and then there's the blue rings. So that looks a lot better. And we'll save this to disk. ce3pit.g code looks good to me. And there we go. So we've exported all of our G-code files. Now we can grab those G-code files, put them onto an SD card, flash that SD card over to our printer, or in my case, I'm using Octoprint, so I can just upload it to the Raspberry Pi that's running Octoprint and print it from there. So that is how to export your models. I'm going to be back after I print them to show you the final results. See you soon. All right, so here we are with the final results, and I realized after printing the green flesh part that green does not work well with a green screen. So I apologize for it not showing up, but I will show you the back. The peel has this bumpy texture because of the fuzzy skin feature that we applied, and then the pit of the avocado fits pretty tightly into the flesh. Now I will admit it might be a little bit too tight. I think if we increased the distance between the flesh and the pit by another 1/4 of a millimeter, it might fit better, but it does stay in there pretty strongly. And then as a bonus, I printed the other half of the avocado using TPU, which is a flexible filament, meaning it can squish. So now I have this full avocado that I can piece together. 1/2 is squishy, 1/2 is hard. I think that's all I have to say about this. I hope you learned something from this tutorial series. If you liked it, please leave a like. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. My name is Eric from Squish Creations. Thank you for watching.